Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am so excited to have conversations in the world, around the world of men's mental wellness. We are a podcast for men, about men anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's some, I know that there are women who listen to the show too, and I appreciate the feedback that we get from that. So thank you very, very much. But yeah, it's great to have these amazing conversations around the world of men's mental wellness. Today, we have a guy by the name of Robert Siciliano. He is fantastic. Very charismatic, Boston born and raised. I love that. Just he's got that Boston charm to him. He owns a company called Protect Now, which is actually a digital security company. Mike, what does digital security and mental wellness, men's mental wellness, and the struggle for it have in common? Actually, a lot more than you'd think. It's not just about what it is that he does and what we can do. And there's a lot of practical stuff here. Like, let me tell you, there's a lot of practical stuff that we can do here. Many times men feel like we should be protectors for our family and the people around us, right? We've got that thing. A lot of us have that thing, if not all of us have that thing inside us where we feel that need to protect. I mean, it's a new day and age, and digital protection is a really important thing. But more so, Robert goes into his story about how he got into this business. And I mean, many times we get into something for a reason, and he certainly did. He talks a lot about, he gets really vulnerable and talks about some of the things he's been through, and I just appreciate that very much about him. It's just a great conversation with a lot of practical use in it too. I hope you enjoy our episode this week featuring Robert Siciliano. Okay, Robert, I said this before we hit record here. We've had lots of first responders. We've had, a lot of police. We've had military, firefighters, different first responders and stuff. I believe we've even had undercover, enforcement on and whatnot. I believe you are our first PI, and you're from Boston, and I'm just so excited. I know how much personality you have. We're going to get into Protect Now and all the other stuff that you're doing. But at the end of the day, when you reached out, being willing to talk about your story, I knew that you were going to be one of my very favorite conversations of the week. Robert, welcome to heCast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to have you, man. I'm happy to have you. Okay. Give us the geographical timeline. How long have you been in Boston?
I'm born and bred in Boston, so 57 years.
57 years. You ran the marathon the day before you ran it yesterday, right?
Yeah, it took me forever, but that's what happens when you've run 14 Boston marathons, and on the 12th one, you get to get ankle surgery. So my training over the past couple of years has been stagnant due to that. I'm still nursing that. And so yesterday I was fighting with the weather, my IT band, and my ankle. And I probably ran in total from December to April 12 miles. And I probably spent about maybe 25 hours on the bike in the garage, spinning. But that was it, So for me, it's a matter of all up here. It's in your head. And then if your physical body can get to the starting line and you know enough about your body to get to the finish line, you should be able to finish, which I did.
I admire the resilience of a runner. I've always said that. I'm in the weight room quite a bit, but running is one of those ones where they tell me about the runner's high, and I don't know when it shows up. I don't know if I've ever experienced it. I'm not sure. So the resilience of a runner is crazy for me. So how much of yesterday was muscle memory? Like, did your body go, okay, I know this, I remember this, and you started feeling familiar, or was it completely foreign? Having not been able to train the way that you had in the past?
So I struggled. I mean, it took me over 6 hours, which is like a forever. I'm a charity runner, so I always anticipate that it's going to take me between 4.5 and 5.5. Yesterday took me a little bit longer due to, my injuries. I ran injured, and muscle memory certainly kicks in. It's really boils down to fortitude and recognizing your own body. Like, to know thyself, I think, is like one of the most important philosophies ever. I mean, if you don't understand yourself and you don't understand like what motivates you, what pushes your buttons, why you are triggered or react to life in general, I think that you're going to always react to life in general. And so for me, knowing myself meant, okay, knowing my limitations. And so at one point, knowing that if I keep going the way I have been, I'm going to tear something. And here and there, like I gave it a little bit more and realized, okay, I'm going too much, too fast, too soon. So I walked like 4 miles
Yep.
before the last 2 miles. And I realized, I think I got this, and I think I can actually give it some speed now. And I went from doing like 15-minute miles to 12-minute miles, and
Oh,
I finished
wow.
before the buzzer. So that was a good thing.
Well, there you go. Okay, having run it 14 times, is it familiar? Do you like landmarks, certain things, like when you're in mile 18, you're like, oh yeah, I remember you as you're walking by something, is it something that's bored its way into you now?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. There's nothing like the Boston Marathon. It is
Yeah.
a 26.2-mile tailgate party. And like and the big thing is like you're looking for the Sitco sign. So if you know
Uh-huh.
Boston and the Sitco sign, it's kind of like this, national treasure. And when you see that, like you did it. And that's when that's when I get all emotional. And that's when like the end is near, which is great, but at the same time you still have to be careful because I've seen plenty of people collapse in that last couple of miles.
Mhm.
And I've run in every possible weather scenario you can imagine. I've run in when it was in the 80s. I've run when it was like sleeting and snowing. I've run when it was like 20, 30-mile-an-hour wind that was just hitting you in the face and beating you to death. And I ran in 2013 when 2 bombs went off. I was actually
Yeah.
right there when the second bomb had gone off. And,
Oh,
that was WTF. And my wife
yeah.
and kids were at the finish line. So that was like a whole thing. And not something you usually forget, which I still get emotional about.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those life enhancing things that I think if you can do, you should. And something that I don't know that I'll ever stop doing. I am one of those guys that like I run up on like the 70-plus-year-old men and stop and talk to them or walk and talk to them or jog and talk
Yeah.
to them and find out like, their story. Like, how many have you done? Like, how old are you? Like, how many is this for you? And they're so inspiring, because like yesterday I met a guy who was 78 and this
Yep.
was his 22nd. And he says, oh, I'm struggling. I'm like, well, I'm struggling too, brother. And another guy, it was his 70th. I'm sorry, he's 70 years old, and this was his 28th. And so I figured out in my head, well, at my age, if I can get to 70 years old, I will be one behind him. I will be 27.
Wow.
you know,
Wow. You just did a beautiful metaphor as to why he changed it exists in the first place. Like you're in this race, it's legendary race, big time thing, but the way you view it, the way that you just articulated, it's like a community. And the
oh,
idea that as you're going through this together, this struggle, this intense physical, mental, emotional struggle, all the things are churned up, especially when you're running compromised or you're doing it compromised, and you're talking to these guys that have been around for a lot longer. They've had a lot more revolutions around the sun, and here you are, iron sharpening iron. And that's what you're doing with them as you're moving forward. You're finding out they're in the struggle, you're in the struggle, and yet what it does is that commonality, that community, gives you a different type of momentum moving forward and insight moving forward. That's exactly what he changed it's all about, really, at the end of the day. And don't we all need that?
you're making me emotional.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
You
what it
know,
is. It's a beautiful thing.
I see you at 75 running it, talking to a dude who's 57 at that point. The 57-year-olds, like, I just turned 50 not that long ago. We think we got it. We think we got things figured out because we can use the perspective to think about the 25-year-old self and what a fool we were at that point. And yet here you're going to be, 20 years down the line, you'll be able to do that to a 57-year-old. I just think that's a beautiful experience. And that's exactly what he changed it's all about. So I appreciate you opening up about that, and congratulations on doing it again, man. And the fact that it's as you get older, the tradition is just going to deepen, as opposed to, being able to use what many people would call as a very valid excuse to say, well, I'm getting too old for this stuff. But you're not going to do that. You're leaning into it more.
My girls have been attending since they were like 3 and 5. My wife pushed my daughters around in a double stroller. Back then, it was like 2 or 3 different spots of the race, which meant she packed them up, drove to one spot, then to the other. Now, like, they're 17 and 20, and they're right there every single time, holding signs, the whole thing. It's good.
Have either of them ever expressed the idea that they might do it with you?
So my 20-year-old ran when she turned 18. It
Yep.
was her first. She hasn't run since. She probably will. Yesterday she mentioned probably running her senior year of college. She's the one that said to me years ago that of all the holidays, Patriots Day, which is the Marathon Monday, is her favorite holiday.
Seems to me like she's going to join you at some point.
Eventually, yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. To switch gears, so you've been doing the Boston Marathon for a long time. How long have you been a PI?
So I was in the business of private investigations for probably 5 years,
Yeah.
which is an interesting business. You know, you're essentially following people around and doing studies on research on people that are up to no good, and
Mhm.
that has a level of burnout to it. You know,
Mhm.
like being a law enforcement officer has a level of burnout to it, right? Due to the fact
Absolutely.
that like you're kind of like at a level dealing with a certain personality type that
Mhm.
grates on you and can mess with your happy zone. So I did
Yeah.
that for 5 years, and I learned an awful lot about the human condition during that time. And prior to and since then, I've been engaged primarily in what we would call security awareness training, which is
Yep.
getting in front of audiences both in person and virtually on managing risk, which means understanding sociopaths, psychopaths, hardcore narcissists, those who don't experience empathy, sympathy, guilt, or remorse, humans that truly have no shame.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Either through nature or nurture, however they would be diagnosed,
Yep.
and what their motivations are and how they choose their victims. So I'm still dealing with that element to a degree, and reverse engineering their processes and how, again, we as the good, essentially the 97%, because I've
Yep.
come to the conclusion that about 3% of humans, they say about 3% of men, I'm sorry, 3% of women and about 6% of men experience being sociopaths or psychopaths
Yep.
and were diagnosed. And that, how they choose their victims and what we need to do to become the tougher target is primarily how I spend my days today.
Well, good Lord. I mean, the onion is so deep on everything that you just talked about there. I want to unpack it a little bit. One of the questions I was going to ask you, you did go down that path a little bit, knowing the percentages. That's great. The percentages is good, and I'm certain it's something that you can, kind of hold on to, knowing that it is really relatively that low. That being said, when you immerse yourself in behaviors of that type and you see these sorts of things, my question for you is, did it jade you about humanity in itself, or were you able to see all of that and realize how much good there was out there, despite these I don't want to say bad apples, I don't want to try and be judgmental when it comes to that. It's there are sociopaths out there that can experience good lives, and they can be productive members of society. I read a stat not that long ago about surgeons and how many surgeons have that ability to be performers at that level, and part of the reason is because many of them have dialed down when it comes to empathy. But that being said, the ones you were seeing were certainly not in that category, whether you're doing the private investigating or you're doing security to protect against. You're seeing a lot of this stuff. Did it jade you towards humanity in itself?
So I am definitely a glass half full guy. I'm an eternal optimist, and I
Yeah.
do choose to see the good in everyone. And I'm
Hmm.
still to this very day surprised when people are just so mean. I had somebody yesterday that was very mean to me,
Hmm.
and it always is surprising to me. And
In the
I'm also a
race?
believer. I'm a believer in karma too,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that it always comes back to get people. Not that that's what I want. I just know that karma has a way of evening things out.
Hmm.
And I spend a lot of my time, energy, and effort thinking good thoughts and consuming good information. And at the same time, I actively try to shield myself from harmful consuming information,
Right.
doom scrolling and such. And
Right.
so I'm always regulating in that regard. Um, I have been kind of, upset or disappointed the past 10 years. Uh,
Hmm.
has been a lot to take, and I'm a little disenfranchised as a result. But at the same time, I still have a lot of faith in what's right, and the truth always, I think, flows to the top as a result.
I appreciate that. And I don't want to diminish what it is that you have been doing and are doing. And I mean, obviously you're a guy who at the highest expert level, I mean, you've been featured on all sorts of very, very, very large platforms, CNN and other places talking about things like security. The way that technology is developing so quickly, I mean, my gosh, it's like holding a pinwheel into a hurricane. It just feels like, it's such a, I read something, and I mean, again, I don't know who to believe when it comes to this stuff, but when it comes to AI and things like that, within a year, privacy will no longer exist. It's just not going to happen anymore. Is this something that is inevitable as we evolve as a species, with technology, as it's curious, I don't know what you'd even call it, like a curious side species that's developing with us? Is security one of those things that is ever going, are we going to get to a place where security will never exist?
So, so privacy, I've been saying for 20 plus years, privacy is an illusion.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know that privacy truly exists since the internet.
Yep.
And I don't know that it truly ever has. But
Hmm.
since the internet, in the mid 90s, privacy is quite an illusion. That
Yeah.
said, I personally am not too concerned about privacy. Privacy has never been my first concern. My first
Hmm.
concern has always been security. And the difference
Okay.
between the two is privacy is, information that people have access to about you, whereas security is information that people have access to about you and what harm they can or do with it. That's my concern. My concern is how people use that information to hurt or harm you, either virtually or physically. Whether they
Yep.
physically hurt you or they virtually, disparage or steal from you. That's my concern. And so I'm not so concerned that people have information about me. My
Hmm.
concern is like how they can use that against me. And
Right.
that's something that I think to a degree is manageable. And as long as you understand that, if you recognize risk in that manner and you do something about the information that's out there about you already to
Hmm.
minimize that risk, then I think that kind of tampers down the friction and the worry and the harm. And that's not a very difficult thing to manage. Just most people don't, because they don't know what to do, or they kind of develop a fatalistic attitude. Oh, there's nothing I can do about it. And actually there is. When it comes to security, there's so many things you can do to become a tougher or hardened target, which most people don't understand or recognize or do anything about. And I serve to provide people with the information to make sure that they can manage that risk, they can become that tougher target. And once you do that, I think it does a solid job of like, um, you know, uh, 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 allowing you to manage your emotions revolving around it too. Because I think in the end, like no matter how old we are, we all want a certain amount of control over our
Yeah.
destiny, a certain amount of control over our lives, and control can be a certain illusion too. But there is a degree of control that we can gain over our lives. Like you put your seatbelt on, not because you worry, not because you live in fear, because it gives you control over the vehicle. Should somebody swerve in front of you, a deer run out in front of you, whatever the case is, over
Hmm.
that vehicle, keeping you tight in the driver's seat so you can manage the steering wheel and the gas and the brakes. And that's all security truly is just, tools to give you control. And so I'm not too worried about privacy, concerned about security. And I think that like there's so much that we can and should do to manage that risk?
Well, I so articulate, and I just appreciate the fact it's clear, why you are, such a renowned, powerful speaker when it comes to this stuff, because you have the ability to simplify things. Those distinctions are amazing. The distinction between privacy and security, that's fantastic. I appreciate you making that distinction right there. And that's I'm also an optimist when it comes to, I am, I see the world. Sometimes I've been told that I've got the glass 3/4 full. Despite there being no liquid in there. That's how I view things. And I believe that we're supposed to be the best, whatever you want to call it, best stewards of responsibility that we have power over. And if something happens that changes the game, well, that's out of our control, but we did the best that we could. I love you talking about the idea of the seatbelt as well. That's a very, very simple way. It's a simple metaphor to describe, things that we can do to help protect ourselves. Again, your perspective, your point of view is it's a very unique. Unique is unique. It's a unique one. I would love to dive into that a little bit. What are some of the seatbelts that we don't even know about that we could put on very, very easily, that you tell people? What are some of the low-hanging fruit things that we could do to harden ourselves? I assume that people who go after folks are the ones who are going to go after the low-hanging fruit. That's why we hear so many elders falling for different types of scams and things like that, right? It's low-hanging fruit in some ways, very easy to manipulate, very easy to get access to. For somebody out there who's got a family, they want to protect their family. There's a lot of dads who listen to this podcast, obviously, right? And we're going through what we go through as men, but then there's also the struggle of being a parent. What's some of the easier things, the seatbelts that we can put on that maybe we don't know about?
So I tell everyone that, like, I can make pretty much anyone in the top 10% of secure humans or secure Americans.
Wow.
Like, it really isn't that difficult because I know that like 90% of us are doing almost nothing. And that as long as you engage in like 5 different things, then you're in that top 10%. And so, like, for example, I get in front of a live audience and I query them. I ask them questions. My job is to change a security culture. It's to challenge people's belief systems, because what people believe of what security is versus what it isn't is diametrically different. And it all kind of goes back to when we're kids, and there's all these like variables there, right? So one of the first questions I ask people is like, so how many of you could honestly say you're using a different passcode across all your critical accounts, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, characters, across each critical account, different passcode across each account? If I get 10 to 15% of my audience to raise their hand using a different passcode, that's a lot, which means 10 to 15 to 20% are not, like, that's 80 plus to 90% of the general public is using the same passcode across every account.
Yep.
What most people don't realize is, like, on the dark web, there's like between 15 and 20 billion of our passwords on the dark web. Okay. There's been like 300 billion records compromised in the past, 20 years. So of that 300 billion records, like 15, 20 billion of them are passwords. So bad guys today, they don't hack, they log in. Okay. So just logging in to your accounts because your username is right there and your passcode is on the dark web. Yep. So that one thing, changing up your passcodes using a password manager, which less than 10% of society uses a password manager. Those 2 things right there, password managers and changing up your passcodes, you're already doing better than 90% of the public. And then from there, 2-factor authentication, which we all use to some degree, but I don't know that we're all using it ubiquitously. Like, I use it on everything. eBay, Amazon, PayPal, you name it. So all my critical accounts have 2-factor authentication, especially my email. Because if they get into my email, now they can get into my bank account, they can get into my PayPal account, they can get into my mobile phone account. And if they can get into my mobile phone account, they can swap out the SIM on my phone. Okay. And once they swap out the SIM in my phone, now they're in my Coinbase account. See how that works? Now they're after my crypto. So by setting up 2-factor authentication for everything, including email, you're already light years ahead of most people, because 80+% don't even use two-factor authentication for email, which is like crazy to me.
It's that high. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
It's bad.
I
Yeah,
use
it's bad.
I was terrified with the first one because it's like, okay, because passwords, it's one of those things where, how do you how do you do that across all these different platforms? And I've got business and I've got personal and all that. So yeah, I've truncated and used a few passwords for certain things. So I was like, oh God, okay. But the two-factor is something I've always done. And whenever I get the option to it, I'm like, oh yes, please. I'm excited to do that because it does feel proactive, by the way. And I think that that's probably something that you probably do touch on with people, that when you are whatever it is, to make yourself a little bit more secure, you do get that little dopamine rush of going, okay, I'm glad that I've done this. Like I'm feeling a little bit more prepared for things. But two-factor is something I've always done. Okay, so 80 something percent of people don't use two-factor yet.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
between password managers, changing up your passcodes, two-factor authentication, there's three. And then this is going to sound so basic to people, but I travel the country, I speak to, urban, suburban, rural. So I ask the same questions, like how many of you lock your doors, and depending on where you live, like rural, I work with realtors all the time. And lots of times, they're we sell houses, after 30 years, the homeowner doesn't know where the keys to the house are. They have no idea. There's no keys to transfer to the new owner, because people don't lock the doors because they feel safe in their neighborhoods, which is great that you feel safe and you should feel safe. And generally people are to a degree, but bad things happen everywhere. And I don't say that to alarm people, but if you look at the local police blotter, bad things happen, and whenever you ask the question, and I ask this question, when you're watching the local news and something bad happens in a neighborhood, and I'll ask you this question, something bad happens in a neighborhood and the local news channel, goes in and with a camera person and a microphone, and they interview the neighbor. They put the microphone on their face. What does the neighbor always say about what just happened that was bad?
I never thought it would happen. I didn't think it would be that person. I didn't think it would. There's just confusion and surprise.
I never thought it would happen here. They always say the exact same thing. To this very day, they always say the same thing, and they will always say the same thing. Nobody ever wants to believe or think it's going to ever happen here. And so we kind of function at a level of denial. And that leads me to my next thing. So the next question I ask is how many of you actually have a home security system, And I ask that because there's 1 to 2 million homes that are burglarized in the US every single year, 1 to 2 million every single year. It's just always been like that. And it'll always be like that. And that means in the next decade, that's between 10 and 20 million homes burglarized. And so I asked a series of questions. Okay, so how many of you so why don't you have the home security system, right? And if 15% of the room raises their hand that they have a home security system, no matter where I am in the country, that's a lot, which means 85% don't. And so the next questions are so if you don't have a home security system, why not? And some of the answers are well, we don't have a home security system because we have insurance. As if insurance is going to protect you at 3 a.m., right? And then the next most common answer is, well, we don't have a home security system because my husband says if they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What are we going to do? I would divorce that guy, to be honest with you, right? Because that's a fatalist attitude, And I'm not cool with fatalism when it comes to security. Why bother? If they're going to break in, they're going to break in. I got a wife, I got kids. I'm going to do what I can, what's within my control, within my budget to tighten things up. Even if you get this house protected by ADT off eBay, you're already ahead of your neighbor who doesn't have that sign. Layers of protection, do something, don't do nothing. And then the most common answer I get is we don't have a home security system because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to be paranoid, they say, which turns out that most people, when it comes to security, they look at security as kind of a bad thing. Security to most people is about paranoia. And they think it's about fear and worry. And people literally say, we don't have a home security system because I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to be paranoid.
Right.
Which is people's complete misconception, misunderstanding of what security actually is. Like, you don't put your seatbelt on because you're paranoid. You put it on because it's a smart thing to do. It gives you control. You don't install a home security system because it's going to make you worry. Like, how technology could do that, I don't know. But like,
Mhm.
that's what people think. And so we have this very unhealthy relationship with security that it's like paranoia, which, I'm sure like paranoia is a diagnosable mental health issue. It's not
Yes.
it's not like a true thing that people get when they engage in security practices. I don't have security practices because I look over my shoulder and I worry all day long. I do it because, I want a degree of control over the results. And that means like I have a number of systems in place, layers of protection to like, you know, make my house look like a tougher target. Therefore, they're going to go target somebody else. And so my job is to change the security culture and get people to wake up and realize you do have actually a significant degree of control over whether or not you are chosen. And if you do these basic things, they're going to move on to somebody else. I mean, unfortunately, they move on to somebody else. But that's
That's
just
right.
like what we do. And understanding and recognizing risk means just taking action.
I love this. There's a lot of guys who are listening to this, and I mean, when you're a guy, you've got that. Many of us, if not most, if not all of us, have that. That primal thing that's inside. It's that instinct, the reptile brain part of that we need to protect what's ours, protect our family, et cetera, protect those who are in our tribe, whatever that is. We have that. Then you marry that to the idea of, think about it. If you think of somebody, I saw some security camera footage not that long ago of some car thieves, and like the car thieves were literally going down the row of cars and they were looking to see what doors were unlocked. Whichever door was unlocked, that was the one that they gave some attention to the car. The one that was locked moved on. Like the most, like you're talking about, the most basic of the basic thing is just to lock the door, right? And so, but then to go back to something else you said is managing emotions. And it's very interesting because I know the career path, like as we've talked a little bit about your history and things like that, um, it's one thing to know the stats and the things to do, and what logically makes sense, the common sense. It's one thing to know that, but then like when you really come down to it, you're managing people's emotions is what you're doing. Is
Yeah.
you're teaching this stuff, but figuring out how people think and finding the spots where our common sense is actually the opposite of what common sense actually is something that you have to kind of recognize and then communicate to somebody to bring them back into that right frame of mind.
I'm challenging belief systems is what I'm doing.
There you
And
go. Yep.
we've all grown up with certain belief systems, and
Mhm.
those belief systems are how we function. We function based on what our beliefs are. We make decisions based on what our beliefs are, and
Mhm.
I certainly function based on what my beliefs are too, but I choose to function based on what the facts are. And that has always just made a little bit more analytical sense to me. And
Mhm.
yeah, I have my beliefs, I have my choices, but there's a lot more, you know, um, if you throw a lot more common sense into it and you challenge, what is common beliefs, then all of a sudden you kind of like unpack certain things that we've been conditioned to think over the course of our lives, and all of a sudden like it doesn't make any sense to think the way you've been thinking. And what security awareness training is, it's what it's designed to do is certainly provide awareness about risk, but what I do is what I call security appreciation training, which essentially challenges people's belief systems about what risk actually is, what
Mhm.
security actually is, and kind of turn them around to understand what security actually does and what its role is in your life. And ultimately, you go from awareness, which is head based, to appreciation, appreciating security, which I think is heart based. And when you
Yes.
appreciate someone or something, like it's on a deeper level, like it means something and matters a lot more to you based on it just being from the neck up. When it's from the heart up, it's like, oh, that actually has impact on me, impact on my life, impact on my family, impact on my business, impact on
Yeah.
the people that I touch. And that's in order to change minds, you need to change hearts. And so that's what I do. I provide security appreciation training. And before you know it, like when I walk into a room and I'm hired by a chief information security officer, they're bringing me in not just to make people more aware, because they already engage in like what's called phishing simulation training, which is
Okay.
like a security awareness training that teaches you about phishing, you know, and they do that like once a year. And they call me when they're like kind of, you know, like behind the gun, and they're like, listen, we just want our people to care about security. We just want them to
Mhm.
care. Like, how do you make them care? You know, and making people care about security is understanding that all security is personal, and security
Mm.
begins with you. You know, and people protect what they love. People will, you know, engage in security practices if they recognize that, like, oh, this is about my child's digital footprint. This is about my
Right.
identity. This is about my social security number. This is about protecting my bank account. You know, so I speak to it from that perspective. And so when I walk in the room, I'm looking at 100 people that are like, they have their arms crossed. They're looking at me with a scowl.
Yeah.
And like, they're looking at me like, okay, security guy, tell me something I don't already know. You know, like, and here we are, like, to protect the company. And as I begin to ask them all of these like challenging questions and pointing out, like, you know, 20 million homes are burglarized in the next decade. There's, you know, 20 billion passwords in the dark web. And I kind of open them up to, like, here are your vulnerabilities. And then start talking about what they can do in their own personal lives to manage their own digital risks.
Hmm.
They all of a sudden, like, the arms begin to go down by their side. They physically, like, kind of lean into the conversation. Their eyes kind of open up a little bit. The scowl goes away. And what happens is, like, their hands begin to go up because now they have questions. Now they
Yep.
want to know. Now they're curious, like, oh, this isn't about my company. It's about me. Like, I've always had questions about this stuff. I want to know, like, what do I got to do to protect my child's digital footprint, my
Hmm.
own identity, my bank account? Like, this is how I manage I didn't know that you could just use a password manager. I was always worried that they would just get hacked. And all of a sudden, like, they have an
Yeah.
opportunity to ask an expert that's been doing this for 30 plus years on how to do this in their own lives. Now they want to know, because humans are a self-interested creature, right?
Hmm.
And so we want to know what's in it for me first.
Yep.
And being selfish isn't actually a bad thing. Selfish gets a bad rap, but like, when you are on the airplane and the flight attendant is providing instructions about the oxygen mask, what does he or she tell you to do first?
You put yours on first. Even if you got your
Actually,
baby that you love more than anything,
put
you
your
put yours on
exactly
first.
put
Yeah.
yours on first, because, like, why? Because you are ineffective unless you take care of yourself first in so many
Yep.
ways, and that primarily begins with your mental health.
Yep.
You are much more effective to all those around you if you take good care of yourself first. In being selfish might mean getting a good night's sleep,
Yep.
consuming, you know, fluids and foods, taking care of your mental health. Like, it is all hand in hand, taking care of your security. Like, without all these things in order, like, how are you supposed to be a good spouse, a good father, a good human, if, like, you're always like just at a disadvantage, like if you're always playing catch up, you know?
Hmm.
So I speak to security in that regard, so that people see, like, it is a very holistic approach to managing our digital and physical lives with security, and everything else will also fall into place if you're thinking holistically in regards to all aspects of being a better human.
Oh man, you said a whole bunch of things there that were. We use the airplane analogy on here a lot because there's a lot of guys out there who, um, well intentioned perhaps, but erroneously so. They literally give and give and give and give and give. They give to their family. They all they want to do is just give. But unfortunately, it empties their tank because they're constantly feeding but never getting fed, and they're not putting things back into their tank again that gets them to the place where they can provide even an even more effective way for their family or whatever. And we have this thing where we put ourselves many times last, and you know what, we got to come up with a better word, but it's like it's self-care. Really, at the end of the day, it's not selfish, it's self-care.
Yeah.
And that includes all of the things. It's as I think about, my father, his generation was the baby boomers, and the father after before that, the Bob Hope generation, the Depression kids. And the idea of protecting your land has changed so much in 2 generations. But if you were to go back to my great grandfather and ask him how important it was to protect his land, protect his family, I mean, 10 out of 10 important. And it was certainly a lot of things that I don't do for my family today, yet I still do have that same instinct. But we don't know what we don't know. And it seems like you're the guy that is really able to teach people about the things that they don't even know that they don't know. And I'm certain that when you meet with people, I'm sure you're infotastic and you throw out some of these statistics, and the information alone is what people start people want to draw in, and they want to hear what you have to say and see what you know. It's important what you're doing, and the part that I am blown away by is you're not just doing it with stats, you're doing it with heart. And I know, like going through a little bit of your background and what we've talked about here before we hit the record light, you evolved to get to this place. And I want to talk about Protect Now. I want to get into that, but I want to get into the guy who built Protect Now a little bit before we actually get to it, because your experience is part of what's led you to being so thoughtful with what it is that you're doing.
Yeah. So a couple things. Like, first, when I get off the platform, 100% of the time, someone always asks me, like, so how did you get into this? What are you, like, former law enforcement, FBI, CIA, Secret Service? Like, what are you, government,
Yep.
law, police? Like, what's your deal?
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, like, I literally am from the streets of Boston. Like, that's how I got my chops. I've been doing what I do since I was a young teen.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it all started off like when I was 12. My dad, I'm 57. So when we were kids, like, our parents would open up the door at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, let us out and say, be back, for dinner time. We'd come back 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, bloodied and beaten and bruised and scarred and cut up and filthy. And here we are. We made it, which is amazing, because there's no reason why I should be alive.
No trackers, no cell phones of any kind, no ways of, yep.
Doing 120 miles an hour in a 70 Nova on Route 1. Like, how I'm alive, I have no idea, but we survived it. I'm not recommending any of that to anybody. I'm just saying, right? That said, like, at 12 years old, my father would let us go into downtown Boston, get on the train. And one time, like, we get off the train and there's like 5 kids waiting for us on the street. Like, they were waiting for anybody. And they mugged us. They mugged me and my little brother, who was 8. They took all our money. And that kind of woke me up to, like, bad actors. And my dad, when we go home, he explains to us, okay, so those boys today, they were the predators and you were their prey. They were part of that, that 3%, the wolves and the lions. And it's natural and it's normal, and they choose their victims, and you need to become a tougher target. And so we started taking karate and kickboxing. And a year later, I meet, like, a girl who at summer camp who I liked, and she liked me, like my first crush. I remember us, like, kind of holding hands in the bus. Mind you, I was 13, and this is like, we're going on like 40 something years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Kids didn't. Okay. So we get off the bus and we're sitting on our front stairs one day, and she says to me, kind of solemn, looking at me. And she says, I think you should know my mother's boyfriend assaulted me. And I knew what she was saying was bad by the way she said it. I didn't quite understand it, though. So shortly afterwards, I go home. I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, what is sex and what is rape? So I learned about the birds and the bees and sexual assault in the same conversation at 13 years old.
Wow.
Again, we didn't know what sex was back then. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have porn. Like, we didn't even have VHS yet. We didn't have any of that stuff.
Yep.
And so, like, if anything, we found a Playboy in the trash on the way to school. Like, that's how you, or in your grandfather's closet, snooping around. Like, you didn't know about that stuff.
Yep.
And so I learned about sexual assault, birds and the bees. And now I'd been a victim of a multiple attack situation a year earlier. I meet my first victim of sexual assault. Multiple attack situation, sexual assault. And now, like, my view of the world is very different than most kids. Yeah. And so over the years, I started gravitating towards professions revolving around security. Mm-hmm. In my mid-20s, I was teaching real estate agents personal protection because realtors are murdered in the U.S. So that was my thing. That's how I made my living back then. And I had an IBM. I got my first computer in 95, which was an IBM PS1 Consultant, which was the make and model of a Windows 3.0 operating system with a 150 megabyte hard drive. And I had a dial-up connection to AOL. I had to buy a separate card to be able to connect to the internet.
Yep.
And I got hacked. And I had the ability to accept credit cards over my computer, and I lost thousands of dollars in credit card fraud.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm already teaching personal protection as it relates to violence prevention.
Yep.
And I get hacked. And so I didn't know that that was a thing. And so I was still responsible for that thousands of dollars of credit card fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, like, as I began to understand that, I realized, like, this is going to be huge. Because in the mid 90s, this happening to me, it can happen to anybody.
Yep.
And so over the years, identity theft started to become a big problem. Municipalities posting social security numbers on the internet because, why not? And ultimately, like, new account fraud via identity theft, people opening up credit cards in their name, became a problem in the late 90s. And so I'm talking about this stuff, speaking about this stuff to realtors and others. And, at the same time, I'm still in my 20s, and I was living like the frat boy life, not going to college. I had my own multifamily, and, like, I wasn't the nicest person in the world. I wasn't like all that empathetic myself, ego driven, wanted like just control. And, like, learned a lot of hard lessons. Most of my relationships back then were young women who were addicts and alcoholics. Like, that's the life that I lived.
Yep.
And I was codependent. And I was like real rough and tumble. And I spent a lot of my time in my 20s at AA and NA with those young women to get them help. Like, I was just, all about the broken wing. And I got a lot of girls through program.
Robert, you're a people pleaser as well then, right?
Yeah.
That's a crazy combination. Keep going. Keep going. I just wanted to note that.
Yeah. But I learned that, like, the more control I wanted, the less control I got, right? And the harder my life became. And so through things like Al-Anon, which is like for codependents, for people that are in relationships with either the family members or in relationships with addicts and alcoholics, that, like, if you don't recover, you repeat. Same thing with alcoholics. If you don't recover, you repeat. And so I just kept repeating and finding more broken wings. And that meant, eventually I crashed and burned, hit bottom a couple of times. And I think I was kind of lucky to do that in my 20s because it really taught me humility. It taught me about my ego and how, like, at that time, it was like really ruining me. And, I kind of softened up as a result, and I became a lot more in tune with myself and others at a very early age as a result of crashing and burning. All the shit that I went through, the fact that I don't have AIDS, the fact that, like, I didn't, die from all the stuff that I went through, like, it kind of really woke me up. And by my early 30s, I considered myself to be pretty conscious, as a result of what I had gone through. And I don't know that a lot of people do that. I don't know a lot of people that experience that. And to this very day, I mean, especially for me having kids, like, truly for me, with what I experienced in my 20s and then having kids, like, really, truly, like, woke me up to a lot of things, And so even today, like, I know, like, the moment I think I know everything, I know nothing, and I haven't known anything for decades, like, at this point, So I'm still learning, and treat every day as a learning experience. I don't know how we got there, but that's,
No. I can't. No, God, no, don't ever. The vulnerability is, I appreciate it so much. There's a couple things out of that. First off, the idea that, empathy can be not just learned, but enhanced. It wasn't that you weren't without empathy. It was that you never, really focused on practicing it and the power of it and how important it was. And then if you're doing it for a misguided, I don't want to say misguided. The broken wings is not necessarily misguided, but it's also not healthy if you're not doing it in the healthiest way, obviously, and you weren't. That the empathy can be misguided, and being able to use it nuanced like a superpower is a very important thing. And the journey is really, I think it's crucial. We're all on a journey. There are guys listening to this right now who are in that spot that you are, but would never dream of being that vulnerable to be able to talk about it. Well, guess what? You evolved to that place and to the idea of where you are right now, whereas I know nothing. You know, that's that old adage, if you're the smartest guy in the room, get into a different room. You know, the idea that we don't know. Again, I look at 25-year-old Mike who thought he had it all figured out. That guy was a fool, such a fool. And 50-year-old Mike is also a fool under the perspective of wisdom that you gain along the way. It certainly also leads to how, okay, yeah, you're street smart and all that, and you're okay, yeah, it's going to be a massive growth industry, so you see where the puck is going, and that's a good thing. But also the need came from your heart, you know, and to go around to how, you know, who's the guy that started Protect Now. Before we get into that there too, I just got to ask, because, you know, father of two girls, you know, 117, and I mean, in unprecedented times, I've got a granddaughter. She's 8. She is my favorite noun. She just flat out is my favorite noun on the entire planet. There is nothing that I appreciate more than my granddaughter. I adore her.
So
and
pure.
I look at what the world that she's inheriting, and I look at her challenges now, here and now, you know, and we're all as a family grasping, okay, when is a phone okay? When is a smartphone okay? Then when is some of these other things okay? Because, you know, we're very, very mindful of some of the things that we need protection for and from. So we're going to get to Protect Now in a second, but I want to go to when you became a father. Certainly a lot of these things that you learned along the way went from 2D to 3D, and becoming a father of girls as well, also very specific, but yet you still have this optimistic attitude. So like, let's talk to some of the dads that are out there, now that we're kind of opening up some of these things, because I certainly wouldn't wish this childhood that my granddaughter is experiencing on anybody, considering the childhood from where I came from in my perspective, where there wasn't any of that stuff, but yet we're in the modern world, right? So
yeah. Well, for one, my daughters didn't get a mobile phone until they were 14.
there we go.
And frankly, it's been all downhill from there, to be honest with you. Like literally, you know,
I get it.
Once they got their phones, that's when like the mental health issues started to kick in, like literally, you know, so they were fine, literally up until that point. Okay. And once they got their phones, it's just too much information. And the only reason why we gave them phones at that age was because look at my girls did not cross the street until they were 14 years old. And that's just based on like the environment that we live in, the type of neighborhood we live in. Like we live in a very city type environment, and play days would meant get in a car and go somewhere. They went to private schools, or they still go to private schools. And that meant getting in a car and driving 30 miles, you know, to school. And so not crossing the street just made sense because it's just the environment. But not giving them a phone up until that age was because we as parents control the information flow.
Yes.
And even still to this very day, I've got parents that reach out to me. Okay, so like what software do I install on my 10-year-old's iPad? I'm like, well, why the hell does your 10-year-old have an iPad? You know, it's just way too much information. And so like, you know, I think at the time, 16 years old, my 16-year-old daughter told me about, you know, Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck and the blood squirting out of his neck. Like that's not normal. It's not supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to be consuming that information as adults, never mind 16-year-olds. Like that's not good for any of us. Okay. It really truly messes with our well-being, our mental health. Like I don't know that people really truly understand that the amount of stimulation that we receive, the 24-hour news cycle, is not a good thing. You know, everything about like us being as connected as we are is not necessarily a good thing. Okay. All that information they're consuming is not a good thing. And if you realize like how it's affecting our children, it is truly not a good thing. And I can tell you story after story after story of parents that I've worked with and children that I've encountered that like are disadvantaged as a result of them getting their phones before the age of 14 years old. Okay, I don't know that they are wired or developed enough to even deal with anything up until that age. And still it was downhill from 14. So that being said, parents, you control the information flow. Like if you can hold off, do it, you know, or at a minimum, like they shouldn't have access to it in their bedrooms, like late at night. Like there should be like in the family realm, like there's no need for any of that stuff. Like, so whatever you can do to like stave it off for as long as possible, please. It's just better for them. There's all kinds of books. There's all kinds of research. Look at states are only right now making it illegal for kids to have phones, or banning them in schools. Like only right now. It's taken them this goddamn long to figure that out.
Yep.
My
smartphone
kid's
is 20 years old. It's taken them 20 years. Yeah.
It's that's ridiculous. It's taken them that long to figure out this isn't a good thing. And it's only now are states making social media illegal for 13-year-olds. Only now. It's taken that long. Like they're only coming out with the data now. I've known about this since day one. It doesn't make me like this amazing prognosticator. It's just, for me, being in the business, seeing it firsthand, being a technologist, I've seen the damage it could do early on. Okay. So
and
all that being said, I'm ranting here.
And a father of girls who sees the change in their behavior. Like again, if we're parents that are aware, and we have awareness, and we're actively listening and watching, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. You don't have to be in the business to see behavior is suddenly starting to change. Oh, we gotta change directions. We gotta slow this train down and figure out where it's going and what's going on. Okay, so all these things, have it's been a confluence of events. Your whole life is a confluence of events to bring you up to this place. Like from your formative years when your neuroplasticity was the stickiest, security became a thing. It was one of those things, a part of daily life. You're seeing people who are affected by some of the unsavory elements of humanity. And so it makes a lot of sense that you've kind of become the guy that you have, other than the fact that you didn't get jaded by it, and that you've kept that optimistic spirit. You've kept that street smart experience that still is a light. And I appreciate that. The fact is, many people focus on the problem. And when they've gone through problems, that's where they keep their focal point. Some people move towards solutions. And Robert, that's clearly what you're doing. And it feels like that's what Protect Now is. So all these puzzle pieces that have come into place to help you, put you in a position to create Protect Now. Let's go into that for a second here, because I think it's really important if people want to be able to hook up with you, connect with you, whether it's on a corporate or a personal level. What is it that Protect Now does?
So what we provide is, the generic term is security awareness training. But what I truly do is what I would call security appreciation training. And in the end, people are, I think most people, when it comes to security, like as we've discussed, they're a little concerned, they're a little worried, they're a little afraid, and they're basically functioning in a certain level of denial, and most security training out there is what I call the compliance trap. Like what's being offered by most corporations is phishing simulation training, which really truly is bombarding employees with, complex, impersonal rules that trigger like security aversion, right? And that false sense of security is felt by meeting these regulatory requirements while the actual human behavior remains unchanged, and vulnerable. And while phishing simulation training is necessary, it's designed to fix the problem of phishing, like I mentioned. But what it fails to do is address humans where they're at. And fundamentally, it doesn't really make employees care. Yeah. So what sometimes happens as a result is we engage in blaming the victim, which we've been blaming the victim forever, right? And in some cases, you should have done this, or you should have done that, or it's because of what she was wearing. It's like, really? Like, are you kidding me? But that's how it's always been. And I've never been okay with that. And so we created Protect Now to kind of flip that all on its head and bring a whole different perspective, like truly a holistic perspective to what security is and what security isn't. Right. And as a result of all of that blaming the victim, we end up having what we call this silent failure. And basically it's a compromise of the human that triggers no technical alarms and often goes unreported because of the shame barrier. Right. And human beings experience a tremendous amount of shame. It's just the way that we're wired. It's a way to control us. It's a way to make us behave. And I get all that. But it's abused and not truly understood in that regard, especially when it comes to security, right? And that shame barrier is like this emotional wall that prevents people, employees, from reporting a data breach, from reporting that they got, hooked in a phishing email or a phone call,
And
right?
that makes things even worse. Yep.
Yeah, it truly does, And so we break that shame barrier by treating like what might be considered a mistake, which really isn't a mistake. It's just being human. Like, you just trust people normally and naturally, and they got one over on you. Okay. And so we treat that as this mistake as not causes for termination, but an opportunity to inform and educate and like walk that person through. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about why, like how the bad actors used manufactured urgency and your human blind spot, which is your default to trust, to get the best of you. And let's talk about that now, so that in the future you understand why it is you possess this human blind spot, because we are an interdependent species. We require each other for our survival. Man needs woman, woman needs man to procreate. So the default to that is giving the benefit of the doubt. We want to believe that people are good and all that stuff, right? So we've updated and upgraded the philosophy, the methodology, so that people truly understand why they're vulnerable because of that human blind spot. And ultimately, we teach them to become what we call the strategic human firewall. And the strategic human firewall is just that. Firewalls like block, various like technical abilities to access a device, while a human firewall blocks deception. It's our recognizing that not everybody is bad, but not everybody's good either. And that like that 3%, let's say, that if they were to contact me, they use this manufactured urgency, click this link or else, do this now or else, and so on. And that our human blind spot biologically wants to believe that all people are good, and that once we click that link, it's going to give us some trouble. So the strategic human firewall blocks deception. It's designed to make us go from I trust automatically to I verify everything.
Right.
And once you do that, now all of a sudden, like every email, phone call, and text message you get begins to make a little bit more sense to you as to what the motivation to click this link or download that file or this manufactured urgency is. So that now, like, you separate yourself emotionally from what's happening here to intellectually understanding it. Interestingly, like, to appreciate security is kind of an emotional process.
Okay. Yeah.
And it means affecting the person emotionally, changing their hearts to change their minds. But once you actually change their minds, you're now asking them to actually disconnect emotionally when a security incident is about to happen, and to think intellectually. Right?
You're teaching them digital street smarts.
Yeah, exactly. But once you actually achieve that, you go through this process of actually disconnecting emotionally from the security situation to intellectually understanding what's happening to you. And before you know it, like, people actually become strategic human firewalls. And what people experience as a result of this is what I call the kitchen table effect. And the kitchen table effect is when you take this company training and you bring it home and you teach it to your family around the kitchen table. Like, try that with phishing simulation compliance training. It just doesn't happen. With this philosophy, with this methodology, you want to teach your family this. You want to tell your sons and daughters, your wife this, your husband this. You want to actually like relate this information because it makes so much more sense beyond just your digital lives. Like, it makes sense on the streets too. Like, you begin to look at risk a little bit differently. You begin to look at people a little bit differently. Not that you worry about them at all, but you look at them like for who they are and where they're at and what their motivations are. And you look at people differently, like in the dating scene, when you meet them online, when you meet them in person. Like, and again, it's not like that you worry about people. You're just like, you're a little more conscious and thoughtful about people's intentions.
You're giving people awareness training. It's literally training for people. We talk about this on the show all the time. How many guys are sitting there just, barreling forward with their blinders on, like a racehorse? You put the blinders on, right? When you take the blinders off, you can see a whole world around you, as opposed to what's just going forward. What you're doing is you're teaching people to take their digital blinders off, and that becoming thoughtful and doing that of course is going to, it's going to permeate other areas of their life.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is giving them a process where they'll actually wake up a little bit and look around as to what's going on, as opposed to, oh, I love what you said about this manufactured urgency. Like, holy smokes, that's exactly right. I don't know that I've ever been, I don't know if I've ever been the victim of one of these things. Perhaps I may have not even known it, but I certainly remember back in the day when, the virus protection, when you had your 586, the first Pentium computers, and how important it was to have virus protection. And if you get an email from somebody you don't know and it's an exe, you don't click it, right? That was just the thing. And I mean, it's gotten so much more complex now.
Yeah.
The idea that people can pop their awareness up as a result of what it is that you're doing, that makes a lot of sense. And boy, again, from a business standpoint, certainly where the puck is going, because people need that. We need more connectivity and awareness when it comes to things, rather than, like you say, another just corporate, phishing training, compliance training, things like that. This is way more important than that. What a very cool vantage point that you've come from, and you found some success through it. So where's the application? Like, if people who are listening to this, maybe they own a small company, maybe they're a business owner, maybe they got a family, maybe their digital footprint. How do people find you, and what are some of the ways that they can use Protect Now for them?
So interestingly, I am no ambulance chaser. Companies that, recognize and see risk, they don't have to wait for something bad to happen, which is
Right.
kind of how we all are. We kind of
Yeah.
react opposed to being proactive. And I think, engaging in effective mental health means being proactive, turning off your devices, getting a good night's rest, surrounding yourself with good people, right? All that stuff, right? Taking care of yourself, self-care. And security is the same thing. It's just being proactive. It's just, it's engaging in proper practices, becoming the top 10% of secure individuals and small businesses, because it's the right thing to do. You want to manage and reduce risk, putting that seatbelt on. And I am constantly providing free information out there. If you follow me on LinkedIn, every couple of weeks, we're writing a really, solid blog article. I got, tens of thousands of followers on LinkedIn. And so just search Robert Siciliano, Siciliano, connect with me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, my website is protectnowllc.com, protectnowllc.com.
I can't tell you how appreciative I am for our dynamic, our conversation today. I'm so glad that our radars got crossed on each other, and we could talk about this. This is one of those subjects that, again, you don't even think about how important it might be, but yet once we start getting into it a little bit, it's like, oh my gosh, there are so many, cross pollinations that we can do for each other when you put the veil of mental wellness over top of this. There's a lot of meat on this bone today. Robert, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and for being as vulnerable as you were. Thank you so much to show us. There's a lot of guys, a lot of food for a lot of thought, as I like to say, on this show today, on this conversation. I appreciate you very, very, very much. And again, congratulations on the Boston Marathon, especially doing it under duress, brother.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Oh man, this is awesome. This is why we do the show. I say this every time. This is exactly why we do the show. These conversations where we are completely aware, and it's not a 9-second blip where we're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, but this thoughtfulness and the idea of talking about the different avenues of things that we deal with as men, the directions that we can go. And really, when it comes down to, we want to protect our family, whatever that looks like. The idea of being, street smart, not just book smart, whether it's out in the open, whether it's on a digital. I think today's conversation showed us that those things are actually closer than we might normally think. If you haven't downloaded the He Changed It app, what the heck are you waiting for? Go to hechangedit.com. You can look at all the information. I love hosting this show. This is a lot of fun. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I get to be front row for all of these amazing conversations. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.